With the Olympic break approaching, will NHL teams have two trade deadlines? What's the best strategy to approach it? And what will NHL teams do? We'll talk about that and player safety at the Olympics. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. I'm here each and every Friday with Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. Happy Friday, Rachel.
Happy Friday to you, too.
We have got a lot to discuss on today's show. We're going to start with the Olympic break because with Four Nations, for example, last year we saw sort of a mini trade deadline as a result. There is a roster freeze during the Olympic break. How do you think teams are going to approach the Olympic break with regard to trades? And will it affect how active teams are at the trade deadline as well?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's two different ways that teams are going to approach this, right? Because if you want to kind of get ahead of the curve here, you might want to get those deals done prior to the Olympic break and maybe get a better rate or get a better deal. Or if there's going to be salary retention or anything like that, you might get a better bang for your buck before the Olympic break here. But there's also a very big risk to that with the Olympics. If your team has players in the Olympics or the player you're trading for is in the Olympics with injury, and do you want to wait and see how the player performs during the Olympics, or if there's injuries, or like if you have injuries to your own team, that changes what your trade strategy would have been. So there's so many different factors here, right?
Yeah, and then you also have to assume more cap. So that has to factor in. And then there's the idea of acquiring a player and then not having that player be able to play for your team, get to know his teammates for 3 weeks while, the Olympics are going on. So there's a lot of things in the mix, but at the same time, you just sort of wonder. The other thing that I think factors into it is how close the standings are. So unless teams start to separate and we know who will be the sellers, that will complicate things as well. Maybe teams want to get a jump to try to stay in or gain some separation from some of these other teams earlier than normal.
Right. And that's the bargain you got to make with yourself, right? Is, what are we trying to accomplish here? And do we know what those missing pieces are yet? Like, is it too soon to figure out what you need in order to make that successful playoff run? Like, do you need that extra runway of waiting until the March 6th actual trade deadline and know where the standings are and all of that stuff? It's, I think that is one of the more challenging aspects of being a GM right now.
It is. And I mean, you could be bold and try to do something sooner, or you could try to let the chips fall where they may. And when you get closer to the deadline, make that move. Now, of course, some of the aggressive GMs may take away some of the players that you're looking at if you are trying to wait it out until early March.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that, positionally, there's obviously like centers and top defensemen are the premium, right? But at this point, like if you need a player like that, you're probably not making the playoffs to begin with. So when you're looking for like the right complementary pieces, or you need like maybe a second pairing defenseman, or you need a power play specialist, or there's all these niche roles, right? That's kind of the last piece that you need in order to have what you think is a more complete team heading into the playoffs. Like, are those guys the ones that are on Olympic rosters? Maybe, maybe not, depending
Yeah.
on what country they're from, right?
Yeah, I mean, the odds are that most of the players on Olympic rosters are considered star players, or
Right.
so most of them are probably not on the trade block, even at the deadline. But we'll see. I mean, from some of these countries, there could be some Olympians who could theoretically fit that description, but I would say that number would probably be pretty small. And then you have to also take into consideration, I mean, what are some of the advantages during that Olympic break? Will players who are not in the Olympics be practicing at all, or is there a complete shutdown of the NHL during that time?
Yeah, I mean, there's like nothing going on during that
Right.
break. So, I think this is a another interesting opportunity for the teams in terms of guys healing up as well, right? And that could change what your trade deadline strategy is. If you're waiting to see, okay, a guy gets 2.5 weeks off, he rests up, and he's like much better equipped to ride out the rest of the season and a playoff run physically. I mean, that could affect things too. I mean, that's why there's so many of these little minutia of this break. It just throws in a very interesting wrench into the GM sphere for this time of year.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And there are some rumors going around right now that are a little bit interesting, and we'll see whether one or two moves, if they are made in advance of the Olympic break, does that open the floodgates? Does it become fear of missing out, and GMs are hungry? Right now, the Carolina Hurricanes are allegedly listening to trade offers for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who's really struggling at this point, but he's still only 25 years old. Any thoughts about where he could end up, or how badly does he need a change of scenery at this point?
I mean, change of scenery can always be a good thing, right? And if they don't see him in Carolina as like a part of that team's future, then yeah, like maybe you take a gander on him somewhere else, if you can afford it in terms of the roster spot and what it means for the rest of your team. Are you going to trade a player back? And then the other question is, what do you think that they could get for him given the circumstances?
Yeah, I don't think his price, his return would be all that high at the moment. But let me put it to you this way: if your goal is to buy low and sell high, this is not going to be it for the Carolina Hurricanes.
No, that's just get her done and do the player a solid and figure it out, right?
Yeah, let's just move on at this point. But we'll see, how that ends up playing out. And then the other trade rumor going around right now is that Blake Coleman of the Calgary Flames, supposedly the Canadiens, very interested in his services. 13 goals, 21 points in 43 games, and a cap hit of $4.9 million. Only 10 teams he could go to. What do you think about Blake Coleman?
I think if Montreal is the team that's interested in him, I don't hate it, just because, it would just be another piece for their bottom six at this point. That's a very expensive bottom six, and I would expect them to try and negotiate some salary retention on this one, because I don't think you want to pay more than 3 at the absolute max for him, right? So if they can get some salary retention into it, I don't hate it, especially if you're looking to have just an extra piece in your bottom six, and then, it covers you in terms of injuries because, he can play up or he has played up before. And if he's on a team that's heading into the playoffs, the circumstances are there.
And then you add the fact that he's a veteran, 34 years old. He's won the
Mhm.
Stanley Cup. He's got that
Yep,
playoff experience. And the Canadiens are a
exactly.
younger, up and coming team. He might be a very good mentor for some of those young players.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I don't hate it.
A ringing endorsement from Rachel Connor right there. She doesn't hate it. All right. We have got a lot more to get to on today's show. The Olympics are less than a month away, and there are still issues with the rink and the arena and the dressing rooms. We'll talk about that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
There's nothing like being near the ice during hockey season. The speed, the hits, the atmosphere, it is unmatched. If you're watching at home, that's great, but being in the building is a completely different experience. The only thing that used to get in the way was actually getting those tickets with long queues, endless screens, and prices changing at checkout. And that is why the Gametime app gives you, the fan, the advantage back. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NHL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The app is incredibly easy to use with browsing, comparing, and buying tickets. It just takes minutes. And one of my favorite features is seeing the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you're getting. Plus, their zone deals come in clutch. You choose the section, they pick the seat. You could save even more. Seeing NHL tickets available for as low as $25 makes it easy to plan a game night out with friends or family. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today.
So, Milan, we're less than a month away.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are still more questions than things we know about the arena and the setup and the player safety issues. What's going on over there, Rachel? I mean, how did we get here?
Yeah, it's so interesting because, we just talked about the trade deadline implications, and we have 26 days until the first women's tournament game. And I understand, the men's tournament is a week later, but, they still have to use that ice. And we have to talk about it holistically there. And when you're talking about, trying to account for injuries in the Olympics that players could sustain, you want to set themselves up for success and having the best ice possible. And we have seen, since day one, like we've been talking about this for over a year, that there was concern about the venues for the hockey tournament. And despite the fact that the NHL just kind of rolled on, assuming everything was going to be okay. And I think that, they're supposed to be doing this test event today to see if, the ice is holding up, but the arena itself is just still not complete. And the facilities for the players are not ideal.
No, they've already been notified. This is not your typical NHL standard of facilities, and they're going to have to do something similar to what they did a couple of years back at Mullet Arena, where they had to walk across out of the locker room in a different way than normal to get to the arena. I mean, it's going to be a little bit substandard by NHL standards. But the safety issue to me is the biggest thing. I mean, ultimately, the NHL has not sent players to the Olympics for 12 years now. And logistics like this are one reason. It would be a disaster if a player ends up getting injured because of the quality of the ice. I kind of get a little concerned that this is just a big, I don't know, it's all for the promotion, it's all for the money, but the player safety aspect of it is sort of getting pushed under the rug.
Yeah, I don't know if it's getting pushed under the rug. per se. I mean, people are talking about it and the league has been talking about it and they've been kind of forthcoming on that front. I just think that they've decided, well, wherever the chips fall, they fall,
Well,
right?
that's what I'm saying.
And like the train has just left the station, and no matter what happens, it's just the games will happen. The NHL players will participate.
It looks that way. And you just have to hope that nobody gets injured. That would be, look, I could handle, and I'm sure the players can handle, for the honor of representing their country and for all that means, locker rooms that don't meet up to NHL standards and having to walk from the locker room to the arena or whatever those little inconveniences are. But if the ice isn't safe, if the arena isn't finished, those are different kind of problems. And you almost have to wonder how that might affect the NHL's future plans at attending Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting and somewhat humorous things about this whole situation is, they have focused on the ice surface itself, but the players are going to have to get dressed in trailers and
Right.
do the walk and that whole thing. But for the fan experience, they have not even done a flush test in that building. And that's a big deal. When you're building a building and it's meant to hold, over 10,000 people in it, like you have to do that all important plumbing flush test where you flush like pretty much every toilet in the entire facility all at once to make sure that you're good to go. And like, if that fails, like you're just, you can't have people in the building. Like you just can't.
That's sort of passing inspection 101, right? I mean, that's something that's gotta work. And they are so far behind at this point. It's a little bit concerning, to say the least.
Yeah. And there was a really great article by Emily Kaplan on ESPN.com that kind of detailed, some of the major issues here. And I think that when you talk about all of this in terms of the fan experience and the player experience, like you just want everybody to be safe, right? Regardless of who it is, and if there isn't adequate access to medical areas, or how is an ambulance going to get to the hospital? Like they haven't ironed out those kind of details there, and I think that's something that, they can figure it out, but will they? And I just get a little nervous for everybody involved, whether it's a player or a fan.
Yeah, no question. And yet here we are, and Brady Tkachuk basically saying, "Hey, we're going no matter what." That the players,
well, sure,
they are dedicated to this. They are committed to it, and I don't blame them. That's that's their dream, to represent their country in the Olympics. It's not something very many people get to do, and you just got to hope that Milan and the Olympic Committee gets their stuff together in time. Look, there's a lot of Olympics in recent memory where there have been last minute scrambles to get everything, to cross the T's and dot the I's and finish the buildings. You just got to hope that they do it and do it well. And it's going to be a very interesting 3.5 weeks that we have between now and the start of the games.
Yeah, and that's the whole crux of it, right? Where I think that I'm hoping everything goes okay. Like I don't want to be all doom and gloom about it, but when you have, I think on you have two things going on here. On the men's side, this is the first time that the men have played in the Olympics for quite some time. So it is a big deal. And it is a marquee event of these games. And in some ways, like how the men's hockey tournament goes will determine people's opinion of the Milan games, right? And if there's any hiccups here, that's going to make them look bad, right? And it's going to make the NHL look bad for agreeing to this in the first place. And then, you also have the other issue of the women's tournament being the guinea pigs for all of this, and a very unfair way. And the fact that they start with the women's tournament and then go into the men's tournament is inherently sexist in terms of setting it up as the men's tournament being the more important one because it finishes later in the games. But that's a whole other issue. But what it does is set the women up to be basically test subjects on this ice, and that is not fair because they are just as entitled to be there. They are elite athletes who play an incredible sport at the highest level, and they've been doing it and come to these games without any interruption this whole time. So it's unfair to the women's games as well, because especially if some of the building issues are not resolved while they're playing, maybe they don't get fans in the building. Who knows? Like it's a whole different ball game. And I think we could be looking at one of the greatest tournaments ever, or a huge disaster, or somewhere in the middle.
Or
and
both.
We just don't, or
Yeah.
both. Exactly. Like we just don't know. And that's the problem, is that 26 days, we should know. We should know.
There shouldn't be these kind of issues this close to the game,
Yeah.
but here we are. Fingers crossed. Hope that everything gets done in time and that everybody is able to stay safe. And we'll obviously keep everybody updated if further developments occur. We've got more to get to on today's show. We've got 3 games that you should look forward to over this weekend. We've got that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you could apply to the bets that you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. So make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So a busy weekend ahead, and still standings are very compact. Every game has meaning. And let's start with the Saturday schedule because there's some very interesting games there. What's the first game that has your eye on it this weekend?
Well, it's got to be Detroit visiting Montreal. Those are the top 2 teams in the Atlantic right now. They have the same number of points at 56, but they're 1 ahead of the Tampa Bay Lightning here. So it's really, really close. And I think that it's just one of those like original 6 matchups too. Yeah. So that makes it a lot more fun. Big division rivals. And I think that these are 2 teams that are really looking to break away from the pack if they can. And this has got to be the way to do it because it's essentially like a 4-point swing.
Right. If it ends in regulation. And I think winning in regulation is very a big difference between winning in overtime or winning in a shootout. And then you've got Tampa Bay 1 point behind these 2 teams with a couple of games in hand on Montreal, 3 games
and an 8-game winning streak.
Meanwhile, yeah. Montreal 7-1-2 in their last 10, Detroit 7-2-1. So that's relentless. How tight things are right now in that division.
Yeah, I think this game's going to be a lot of fun. They haven't played each other since the very, very beginning of the season, too. So I think, the fact that they've kind of gone on their merry way and both come back to the same point after Montreal, like, pretty much trounced Detroit, and Detroit, did not have a great beginning to their season, but they've, gotten it together, and the pieces are coming together, and of course, we just saw Patrick Kane hit a milestone in there. So there's like a lot of momentum with
Yeah,
this team right now.
should be an excellent game to kick off this weekend. And then the late game on Saturday that we are watching right now, a perennial playoff matchup, the LA
Yeah.
Kings visiting the Edmonton Oilers, their favorite opponent. And I mean, let's start with Connor McDavid because he is red hot right now on that big point streak.
Yeah, he has matched his career high point streak at 17 games. So he's looking to extend that. I think that is a huge storyline here for sure. And, we do joke about these two teams playing each other all the time. And the Kings are in a playoff position as of now, which they weren't for a hot second, but they're still struggling a little bit here, right? They've been playing a little bit more uneven hockey. I think the Oilers are slowly getting it back together, but
Yeah.
maybe not completely. Like they are a beatable team on any given night. I saw them play like a not so great game against the Flyers pretty recently. And so, this is a huge, huge opportunity for the Kings because, again, as we've said, if they get 2 points and a regulation win over Edmonton, that puts them in the top three, or it could put them back in the top three as opposed to being in the second wild card spot.
Yeah, every game is just magnified right now. And the Kings, by the way, much better on the road this year than at home. And this game is in Edmonton. So that's going to make it even more interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
And then one other game that we have our eye on Sunday, two teams that are kind of going in the wrong direction, the New Jersey Devils and the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, a lot of times we try and pick games for this that are like top teams or most exciting, or there's a rivalry going on. There is like none of that happening here in this game. But both teams have been so fascinating because you look at how far the Winnipeg Jets have fallen, right? And we're talking about trade deadline moves, and are they going to be big sellers? And who would it make sense to get out of town and give them a shot, or can they get it back together to at least have a respectable end to the season in Winnipeg? Like these are huge storylines, and they're playing a team that started off this season very, very strong. Obviously, like huge injury problems here, but they got Jack Hughes back now, so they're at least part of the way back. But they've lost 3 games in a row, 3-6-1 in their last 10. And, they're not too far out of the playoff position here again, because everything is so tight, but it just feels like an astronomical gap here. And this could be a good first step against a team that's just in free fall.
Yeah, 11 losses in a row for Winnipeg. But with New Jersey, I saw them earlier this week. The Islanders played them on Tuesday. The Islanders beat them 9-0.
Oh
And the thing that was amazing to me, other than the terrible goaltending that the Devils had, they just didn't seem to have any pushback in that game while they were being blown out. And that has to be a concern. Is the coach losing the room? Has this team quit on each other and on the coach? That to me is a big question, because they just don't seem to have any drive, any energy, any pushback right now.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, how do you build confidence back, right? And then it also brings up the question, are these coaches on the hot seat now?
Yeah. It has to be a question, because you can't lose 11 in a row, and you can't lose 9-0 games where your team just looks completely flat and doesn't fight. Not good signs. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure. No question about that. If you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for your favorite NHL team that's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. And you'll get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of your favorite team's show. So definitely check out that. You can find the link in the show notes or go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. Rachel, I will be back on Monday interviewing 3 of our local hosts about the biggest stories from around the NHL. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, so hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Gil Martin. She's Rachel Donner. Have a great weekend, everyone, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL Podcast.